Welcome into our Backyard Brothers podcast. It's Friday night, March 3rd. We are doing this on a little bit different day due to some conflicting schedules on Saturday. And before we start, let me offer another congratulations to Dustin and his newly grown family. Dustin, do you want to say anything? Talk about your new addition there?
Yeah, we had a baby on Wednesday night on March 1st. I get to for the rest of my daughter's life whenever she says, somebody asks her, "When's your birthday?" She says March 1st. And everybody has to march around the room first. So I'm excited to have that dad joke live forever, the rest of her life. But yeah, we had a wonderful birth experience at home, where she quickly but very sweetly and gently entered our lives.
Yeah, that's great.
Congratulations.
Yeah. We are entering a different kind of format today, and we'll be doing this kind of format on and off for probably the next couple of months. That is, when we invite a guest onto our podcast, which we've done once so far, and we'll be doing it later, that the show is all about the guest's interests, the guest has areas of expertise, and we ask some questions of that guest and things like that. And so to kind of get into that format, we've decided to have each of the three of us be those guests to start to kind of introduce that kind of format. Today is my turn. And so Cody and Dustin have some questions for me that I can answer. I just like to introduce my areas of expertise real quick so we can get that grounded. I have a background in sports journalism, which is a little bit. I've covered everything from the major sports of football, basketball, and baseball. Dustin put in a chat for the memory. We're not going to do the memory today. We'll do it for the next recording, just because we have 4 questions today and 3 the next time, so it just makes sense. Does that make sense, Dustin? To do
Yeah,
the next time? Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yes, we can hear you. So anyway, my background is more analytical approach and statistical approach than necessarily current gameplay and things like that. And so I like to look at numbers. I like to look at statistics. I like to look at history. And so that's my background. That's my areas of interest for sports, and it runs the gamut. But my primary areas are football and basketball, professional mainly, but some college as well. So let me end it there and toss it over to Dustin and Cody to ask some questions. We do, like I said, we did have a memory planned for today, but we're going to move it to the next part of my show, just because there's fewer questions, I believe.
Okay, so I want to ask you, Scott, a question about the NFL, about sports. So we've heard the phrase all throughout sports: defense wins championships. And from me, my perspective, looking at that from basketball, I can think of a few teams where defense was the framework that helped them win a championship. And I'd like you to address where that has happened in football, in the NFL specifically. Which NFL teams have been able to win a Super Bowl where the defense was the backbone? They won a Super Bowl based on their defense.
Yeah, I love that question because it's a little bit different in today's NFL, I think. In today's game, you need to score points to win. This last Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago, both teams scored 30 plus points, right? You talk about teams in today's NFL like the Broncos, who have a great defense, but you can't win in today's NFL without an offense anymore. You have to score some points. And so it doesn't you have some great defenses that are combined with great offenses in today's NFL. So it's sad to say if you're a lover of defense, but I think that style where a defense can completely carry you to a championship is kind of over in the NFL. Hopefully it makes its way back, but you have to score some points. But you look back at some of the ones from years ago, the Steelers steel curtain defense in the 70s, the 85 Bears, the 2002 Buccaneers, 06 Bears got to the Super Bowl behind a number one defense, couldn't beat Peyton Manning and the Colts. The 07 Giants pulled that huge upset over the undefeated Patriots. But the big one I wanted to talk about when I hear that is the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. The Ray Lewis and Peter Boulware and Chris McAllister and Dwayne Starks and Michael McCrary, that team was defense. They won a Super Bowl behind a quarterback named Trent Dilfer. He was a backup that year. Tony Banks was the starter, got injured halfway through the season. Trent Dilfer, the backup, took over, and sometimes you say he led the team to the Super Bowl. He didn't. He was a quarterback that just didn't manage the game enough to hand it off to Jamal Lewis and let the defense control the game. And looking at the stats of the Ravens, they led the NFL in 10.3 points per game, 10 points per game, 238 yards a game. They had 49 takeaways for the season. That's more than 3 per game. They were the only team to allow less than 1,000 yards rushing. They had 4 shutouts in the regular season. They had 9 games where they forced the opponents to score single digits, including they allowed 23 total points in 4 postseason games to win the championship. They were a fantastic defense. The offense wasn't special. But you look at that amazing defense, and I mentioned a few of their great players, but it was all on defense, and that was the one that I would point to the most. I think, Dustin, you were talking originally about who are the 2004 Pistons, the equivalent to that team in the NFL. In my mind, it's the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, because of so much defense led them to win the Super Bowl. They didn't. Like I said, their offense wasn't special. They won games 16-0 against the Steelers that season, 12-0 against the Browns, 15-10 against the Jaguars, 13-7 against the Cardinals. And in the AFC Championship game against the Raiders, they won 16-3. This is not an offensive powerhouse. This was a defense that held teams to 3 points and 7 points to win games. Special team. And a lot of people know about that now because I think ESPN special just came out about the Bullies of Baltimore. About that same season. So
I have one question
Good.
to go
Thank you
off that
for
real
addressing
quick.
that. That's great.
I'm sorry,
Go
say
ahead,
that
Cody.
again, Dustin.
Thanks for addressing that. That's a great historical background, great statistics to background up, and it's neat to see a team that was fully built on defense do so great.
Yeah. Cody, you had a follow-up?
I have one just quick follow-up out of curiosity. When he asked that question, my thought went to, and this could just be my bias as well coming in, but I wanted to know, is the most recent defensive Super Bowl win the 2013 Seahawks, or is that not in the same category?
I thought about them too. They certainly had it wasn't a full team defense, in my opinion. It was a great secondary that shut down opposing receivers. They didn't have a pass rush. They had a couple good linebackers and they had an amazing secondary, but also important. I mean, they won the Super Bowl. What was it, 44-10 or something like that? They had a great offense too. And so, yes, you obviously having a great defense and a great offense, you win the Super Bowl by that. And a lot of teams have done that in recent years. But in my mind, that Seahawks team had a great team all around, and their offense was just as good, if not a little, not quite as known as that defense. But certainly a great defense. I just didn't consider it because I also thought that offense was really special too.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that.
Yeah, to go off of that, I would say if you have a MVP winning quarterback on your team, you have a good offense. Same thing with like the Broncos and Peyton Manning, where
Mhm.
it was the defense that carried them to that Super Bowl, but you had Peyton Manning on your team. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to my question here. I kind of have a kind of like a two-part question here, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the draft since that's coming up in about a month and a half or 2 months or so. Um, what skills do you think are most important for players to stick on teams to be great? And why do scouts appear to miss that sometimes? And
Yeah.
as the second part of that question, is that suggesting that perhaps rounds 4 through 7 are maybe more important than 1 through 3? Because it seems as though there's been some jackpot type selections in the later rounds than there have been in first rounds. So tell me your thoughts on that.
I love this question because I love draft analysis. I love draft picks. And you said two things there. In your first part of the question, I think there's two very distinct parts. You said what makes good enough to stick and what makes a great player. Those are two very different things, in my opinion. Big difference between being great and sticking on NFL rosters. They're completely different measurable. Uh, what a lot of people don't understand is that in what you mentioned in rounds 4 through 7, every team is going to make at least one pick, oftentimes more than one, that is completely based on special teams help. 100% based on that. A running back, a receiver, a linebacker, a cornerback that doesn't actually fill a need on the roster, but they have the measurables to help on special teams. And so I think that the biggest thing that the majority of players need to have or to develop to stick on NFL rosters is a willingness to do that unglamorous work, the unseen stuff on special teams, the gunners who run down on the sides of the punts and kickoff coverage, the punt protectors, the blocking on return games. If you can do that and you can do it well, you will always have a job in the NFL. The big one that sticks in my mind is Taysom Hill. He was a quarterback, right? He came into the league trying to be a cornerback, but he doesn't play that position. He got on the roster because he was willing to do anything, and that included starting on special teams. He ran down as a pass protector, as a gunner. He got dirty and in the dirt. He was willing to do whatever it took to be on an NFL team. He wasn't drafted. Today, I think many teams would draft a guy like Taysom Hill over a receiver or a running back or something like that in a 4th or 5th round because they're willing to do all those things. I think of another guy named Matthew Slater. That name won't be known by the majority of casual fans, but he is going to be a Hall of Famer. And he's been on 9 Pro Bowl teams, maybe 10, 9 all pro teams, purely because of his special teams work. He's a wide receiver, and over a 15-year career has 1 catch in his career, 1, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer because he was willing to put in the work and understand that his college production doesn't mean anything in the NFL. You have to adapt. That's hard for a lot of guys. There's a lot of great college running backs, receivers, who play 2 or 3 years in the NFL and never make a mark and never play another team down because they're holding on to their glory days of college where they were the number 1 guy. It's different. You have to swallow your pride, be adaptable, be willing to do special teams. And so that leads to me, what are the scouts looking for that they don't always, they're looking for those splashy players that make big plays. But a lot of times they don't have the teamwork. They don't have the character issues. If I'm a GM, I definitely want to look for talent, but I want to look, how I can develop a player in a position, but I want to see and I want to know that this player is going to play for the name on the front of the jersey and not on the back of the jersey. They'll do whatever it takes to stay on the team. They draft linebackers, wide receivers, but if I'm a GM, the biggest compliment I'm paying to a guy in a 5th or 6th round pick is that he's a football player. I want a guy who doesn't want 100 catches. He doesn't want to hit that milestone of 5 interceptions. He wants to play football for my team no matter where that is or what he's doing. And so to touch briefly, I guess, on being great, it's similar, but today's biggest splash is positionless football. Is positional versatility. You look at Deebo Samuel. as probably the best example of that. He's a receiver, but he lines up in the backfield just as often as he lines up as a receiver. He can do anything on the football field. They put him in position to do all of that. Christian McCaffrey is another one. He's just as good a running back as he is a wide receiver. And if there's a theme here, it's not just that they're my favorite team. It's that the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan are the absolute best at putting guys in position to be impactful wherever they are. It's being a football player. You don't limit yourself to one thing. It's the same thing as an offensive lineman, a star offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. Be able to play on the outside just as much as in the interior. Work on your game so your team feels comfortable moving you around to find the best combination. And so about rounds 1 through 3 being more important, it's not necessarily more important 4 through 7 than it is 1 through 3. It's just different. Teams are looking for different types of players. They should be, at least if they're a good drafting team. 1 through 3, you're looking for an alpha wide receiver, a starting running back. That's why it happens that you get a splash of surprise in rounds 4 through 7. It's such a huge surprise. Brock Purdy wasn't supposed to be a starting quarterback this year. And even if he wasn't supposed to be an effective starting quarterback. Rounds 1 through 3 are looking for immediate contributors. Rounds 4 through 7 are looking for developments, special teams play, and that elusive diamond in the rough.
I like that. It's a well-rounded answer. I don't think I have any follow-ups on that. Dustin, do you have any follow-ups?
That's great. And I think I agree with you completely. That's great. Thank you. All right. My question, and jumping back into basketball, into the NBA, I want to ask you about the triple double, which is when a basketball player has 3 different statistics of at least of double figures, say at least 10 points, at least 10 rebounds, and at least 10 assists, or what's most common. You can also get it in get that in block shots. You can even get it in turnovers, double figures in those. But it's of those 5, you have at least 3 in double figures. And I want to ask you about, in recent past, we've seen more and more triple doubles happening from a huge variety of players. You can name Russell Westbrook averaging a triple double for a season 4 years in a row, which is unheard of. And Nikola Jokic, a 7-foot center, just recorded his 100th triple double of his career last week. And so the question I ask is, what do you think about the potential dilution of importance of the NBA's triple double? Is that a real thing? What do you think?
This is such an interesting question too, because as you mentioned, about 10 years ago, having a triple double was a huge deal. 10, 15 maybe years ago, it was huge. It was a huge accomplishment all over ESPN, all over the newspapers. In today's game, someone seems to log that every night, right? Usually his name is Nikola Jokic, but other guys have been doing it too. The prevalence of a formerly great achievement, you said dilution. It does dilute the power of the achievement. Once it becomes easy, quote unquote, because it's not easy, but once it becomes easy to do, it's no longer as special as it once was. But I want to be careful saying that, because that doesn't mean that its impact is diluted. Because having a triple double is so beneficial to your team. Looking at Nikola Jokic in particular, right? Nikola Jokic has 24 triple doubles this season. In those games, the Nuggets are 24-0. That is ridiculous. That's amazing. When Nikola Jokic records a triple double, the Nuggets do not lose. That's not a coincidence. It can be that impactful when you have a player dominating in all those phases of the game. So I want to answer that question by saying yes and no. I don't think the statistic has lost its power on the game. It is just as impactful today as it was 15 years ago, because you're dominating in that way and helping your team win games. But I think the achievement of recording a triple double has diluted its power quite a lot. It's no longer a huge deal in achievements, but it's still just as impactful to the outcome of the basketball game. Any follow-up questions? Any
Great
thoughts?
comments. Great comments. It's super impactful on who wins the game, and it's a super impressive achievement, regardless of how often it happens in today's game. Thank you.
One follow-up question for me, and this will show my unintelligence when it comes to football or basketball. But remind
think
me
you-
what a triple double is.
Dustin mentioned it at the very beginning of that question. It's when you're
Oh.
logging double-digit points in 3 different categories, or double-digit figures in 3 categories. So
Oh, okay.
having 24 points, 13 rebounds, and 12 assists is a triple double.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Okay,
Basically
well,
showing that you can control every single important facet of the game as a single player. That it's important to score, it's important to rebound, it's important to help your teammates. If you do all 3 of those things in the same game as a single player, it shows kind of a overall skill set for your ability as a basketball player that you can do everything.
okay, thank you for that. Okay, so not intentionally giving you any whiplash here, but we're shooting right back over to football, actually college football, to be specific. But this is something that's been on my mind for a while now, especially whenever everything about playoff expansion started coming out. And so that's what this question's about. I was curious as to with NCAA, they're expanding to 12 playoff teams. We're aware of that already in 2024, I think. Is it feasible and is it possible, I guess, is for FBS football to move to a tournament like playoff at almost like March Madness? And I know that FCS football has a tournament. They have quite a really big playoff format. And so my question is, if FCS can do it, why can't FBS do it? What's your take on that, and explain that for me?
Yeah. Very short answer, no. But let me explain. I actually wrote a feasibility study of this that I think I'll link on our website. I wrote this 2018, I think, feasibility study of going to a 12-team playoff, and it's kind of weird because the committee must have got a hold of it because they did it exactly the way that I said they should. So that was kind of cool to see, by the way. But so first of all, a 60, college basketball has a 64-team playoff. That's not feasible in college football. It just can't happen. It would be great, but you can't play football every other day like you can play basketball. You're running into issues with school as well. There's finals schedules when school is in session, dealing with laws regarding student athletes. Adding a 16-team playoff is adding essentially another month and a half to the season, and you just can't do that. And so no to 64. The FCS tournament is 24 teams, but it's not a 24-team tournament. It's technically 2 12-team brackets. That's the way it works. You have you have 2 12-team brackets, and the winner of one plays the winner of the other for the championship. That's the way that FCS works. It's a cool way to do it, but I'm not sold on expanding to 24 teams at all for college football. Everyone totally believes in the 12-team expansion, but once you add more teams to that, you are really diluting the importance of a conference champion and of the regular season as a whole. I just don't believe in expanding it more than 12. Even 16 is too much, in my opinion. And again, I wrote a feasibility study. I'm not going to, I'm looking at it now and trying to find some of the highlights there, but obviously the benefits of this, it's erasing the conundrum of a Power 5 champion being left out of the playoff. With this way, all 5 Power 5 champions go to the playoff, right? Also, this format gives a chance to teams like in the past, Central Florida and Western Michigan that went undefeated, but weren't considered good enough. Boise State, TCU, although TCU was in the championship last year. Utah, who in recent years went undefeated, but they didn't get to their major bowl game to finish undefeated out of the season. They still had no chance to compete for a championship. They lost out on that. This kind of corrects that idea. It's also it has the potential to create more parity in college football. Right now, there's about 6 teams maybe that are annually the best in recruiting, the best on the field, the best hopeful destination of every top prospect in the country. They include Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Oklahoma, right? There's a second tier of teams. But with this 12-team playoff in place, I think other teams that have great season or consistently great seasons have the chance to compete for not only national championships, but in the recruiting game as well. Now, I don't, 16 teams is feasible, I guess. But there's 2 problems I see with it. First, it would be very difficult to mitigate all the other bowl games. College football is a business, right? You have to have all of these sponsors and these businesses that are part of these bowl games. You're not going to win that battle when you're relying on millions of dollars coming in for each of these games and each of these sponsors. You have to have them. And even if you're relegating each one to their own specific bowl game, if you're adding 16 teams, you're adding I guess it's a 15 games in that point, and it's just making it difficult to increase that or to mitigate all those bowl games. It increases the time and the number of bowl games that have to be replaced, and secondly, it essentially has a straight up 16 team playoff, and it really lessens the importance of those top 4 teams that get a bye in this 12-team playoff. And so that's important. College football said that was important, that those top 4 teams should be rewarded for being the top 4 teams and get that bye. And if you make it 16, suddenly everyone plays the same amount of games. And so you're lessening the importance of being as good as you were to get to that ranking. The fact is there's always going to be situations where the choices are going to be tough for the committee to make. There's always going to be complicated formulas. You don't want to create a situation where the committee fields 12 Power 5 teams, right? Leaving out one of those other ones. There has to be a minimum of 2 group of 5 teams. So, I mean, let's see, what was I thinking of? I just lost my train of thought, but yeah, I mean, you have to field a minimum of the group of 5 teams, but it's going to be different every year, right? Because sometimes that group of 5 is not going to be very good. You're not going to have an undefeated group of 5 teams some years. So you're going to have some that finish 10-2 is the best you're going to get, and out of those years, you only have 2 group of 5 teams make it to the 12-team playoff. Well, everyone else is in the Power 5, but maybe other years you have 4 or 5 great. And so you have to have some flexibility, and that's what I think this 12-team playoff allows. I'm really in favor of the 12-team playoff. I think it's a sweet spot. 16, you're adding too many. 8 is not enough. So that's what I think about that.
I really like that. I appreciate your answer on that. I don't think I've actually had it explained that clearly before to me. So that was really good because I didn't really take into account making sure that the importance of winning a conference is rewarded and is part of that playoff. And 16 can really make it not, as you said, kind of cut that importance out. So that actually makes perfect sense to me. And I think I agree with everything you said. I just didn't know I did agree with it.
So I have a follow up, and I think it's a little bit disagreeing to what Cody just said. Is I look at the SEC, where you have teams like Florida, LSU, Alabama, Arkansas, and now Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC, where it's potential that you have 6 out of the top 12 teams in the same conference and only one conference championship to go around. And how does that, where you have a team that's 11-1, ranked number 10, but how do you put them in the conference championship when you have half the other teams? In the 12-team playoff, when half the other teams are also in the 12-team playoff from the same conference. And I just wanted to see if you have any follow up to that, Scott, if you can address that at all.
Yeah, it's a good point. And unfortunately, it's going to get more complicated because the Big Ten is doing the same thing. They're grabbing Washington and Oregon out of the Pac-12, and suddenly the Pac-12 is going to be destroyed. It's going to be like the what do you call it? The WAC. It's not going to be anything anymore. They're going to be Power 2 now. You're going to have the Big Ten and the SEC and 6 conferences that are below them. And that's a problem. It's a big problem because it was set up perfectly until all of these teams are leaving conferences to join bigger ones, I guess. And it makes the college football playoff tougher because, like you said, there's if you're going by the way that the committee is going to do it, you could end up with half of your 12-team playoff being the SEC and the other half being the Big Ten. And that's not the way that it should be. And so it's going to have to adjust. You're going to have to start being less flexible and saying that only 3 teams from one conference can end up being in the playoff. But that's going to create its own problems as well, because how can you say that a 10-2 LSU team is better than a 10-2 Central Florida, right? You can't say that Central Florida belongs over LSU in that case. You really have to take in strengths of schedule. You have to be flexible enough. This whole conference realignment is going to make a big mess. And I know that the committee has thought about it, but each team and each conference is looking out for its own right now, and it's going to destroy a lot of this parity again. And so I'm not looking forward to it. I last year was the least amount I've ever watched college football. I didn't even watch the national championship game. I'm losing my interest in college football just because of a lot of this. And it's sad because college football is turning into even a bigger business than anything else, and it's diluting the importance of a lot of things. And that's up for an entire other discussion. But as far as the playoff goes, I love what they've done if the teams and conferences aren't screwing it up like they're about to. So.
I have one follow-up to what you said. Oregon and Washington joining the Big Ten is news to me. When did that come out?
It's not official, but the Big Ten is recruiting up to a minimum of 2 teams from the Big Ten. It could be as many as 4. Oregon and Washington are the 2 they're really looking at, but they're also looking at Stanford and I'm trying to remember the other one.
I thought USC said they were. I thought USC.
Yeah.
I think USC has already announced that they are going to the Big Ten, and
that's right.
Same with one of the others. It might be
UCLA.
UCLA, yeah. So Stanford, and there's another one that they were looking at in addition. I remember Stanford was one of them. I can't remember the other one right now. So
okay, was it? So then, sorry, go ahead.
So to kind of play off of your rant, and I think that it qualifies as a rant because I agree with it as well. But I'm interested to see the future of college football if these big teams all of a sudden flock to other conferences in order to then try to have a better chance to get into the 12-team playoff. And so all of a sudden it doesn't matter where you are. doesn't matter where your team's located. You have Florida, who's all of a sudden in the Pac-12 because it makes best sense for their strength of schedule and things like that. And then also what I would love to see is the SEC and the Big Ten. You're going to get enough teams totally separate from the rest of the NCAA. You have the strength right there and create your own league between the two. You create 32 team league between those two conferences and play by yourself.
Yeah.
Forget about NCAA.
And I would be okay with that, honestly. I would be okay with that. It would help. It would help college football. But that's going to be near the end of our recording.